What's up, folks, and welcome back to Replay Works, and welcome back to the Replay Review. So, it's been a while, and I purposely wanted to wait a little bit into Set 2 before jumping right back into the channel because I want to experience the meta, given my schedule, and also figure out what the cadence would be to do some recordings, to do, like be able to go to locals and do recordings as well, right? So now that I kind of have a stable grasp on what that's looking like, it's time to jump back in, and we're going to be kicking things off with the Eagle's Nest webcam locals again. So I'll be trying to do this every week because I like the sense of it's a webcam locals, means that people from all over get to play in it, and B, people bring some creative decks into this, and I want to highlight that and showcase those off because as much as I acknowledge that green-white is a really good deck, it's probably the best deck, it has the most majority in tournaments, I want to look at some of the other types of decks that people are playing because it's more interesting for me because I like to see how creative people get in this game, right? So with that being said, we're going to try to do this again. We're going to kick things off and let's take a look at what was being played, right? So here's your overall placements, right? So in first place we got the blue-purple mid-range, and then we have 1 Year War, followed by a bunch of blue-white freedom blockers, which have a little twist on that, which I'm going to showcase. So I opted to do anyone that was like X2, so I have 11 decks in the pool. So I think, this was one of those days that people just decide not to play white-green or green-white. I, respect that. But yeah, I mean, we have rush decks on the top, and we have a bunch of blocker decks on below, so, since it's straight Swiss, it's going to come up to matchups, but between 1 Year War Rush and the blue-purple mid-range deck, it's kind of a good toss-up between those two, because the 1 Year Rush deck has a lot of explosive potential, but now that the purple deck has tools like Gundam First Form and Gujin, it can kind of solidify itself around turns 4 and 5, and it doesn't need to play like a rush deck anymore, especially when you don't have stuff like Char to give high maneuver, right? So we're gonna probably take a look at that later on, but let's just keep looking at some stats, right? So here are the overall color combinations across the entire tournament, or for the top 11 decks. Again, just only did the X2 people, X2 and above rather. So we have the 3 blue-whites that were in a row. We have 3 blurple decks floating around. We have 2 green-blue decks, green-white, red-blue, and red-white. So, I like seeing diversity. It's fun. It's better than just looking at 8, of one deck in the majority. So it's a nice perspective just to see like all these different decks being played, and people wanting to play different decks, So, and here are the colors played overall. Blue, you're just gonna see that everywhere, but got a sneaking suspicion that eventually we're gonna see white be at the top of this list as we go into like bigger regional tournaments or stuff like that. Alrighty, so first things first, let's go ahead and kick things off with the first place deck, the Blurple deck, or the blue-purple mid-range deck, right? So this deck changed a lot between what we had at the Set 1.5 meta, as I'll call it, when we had just STO5, and now when we actually have good purple support. Now the reason why it changed from a rush deck to a mid-range deck is because, as I mentioned, we have the First Form, we have Gujin, right? So this allows the deck to play a little bit slower and recover back the hand advantage based off of just being able to swing with First Form and then cover it with Gujin, right? And the fact that we're starting to see 4 Fatal Strikes in the main deck is very telling of the fact that this deck wants to do efficient clears and go for damage, but not necessarily needs to just bunga put the hand on the field and try to go for game, right? It is playing a lot of vanillas. It's only playing 2 Resol's. We don't need to play 8 Resol's, let's be honest, anymore. We have First Form, which actually is a lot better mid game, and it has a lot of the usual suspects from the previous list, right? We have Amuro maxed out, Mikazuki at maxed out, 4 Corsicas, of course, 2 Shore Resolves. Now that we have First Form, which is a little bit of a different draw engine, we don't need to play 3 or 4 shows. 2 is fine, in case you don't see them. And then the fun part for me actually is looking at the Hyzax here. It's just a 2/2 vanilla, but like you play that early on and you can kind of like pretend that you're playing Titans for a little bit, and to assume that you have the Psycho Gundam in the back. So I find that hilarious that the Hyzex there over any other vanilla that exists. But yeah, it's a fun deck to look at because again, not many things have changed with this deck in terms of the different cards. There are much better choices in the deck that you can now play. Again, getting rid of the Hakurin to play the first form. That's like one of the bigger ones. We're not playing fourth form, so no need for suppression. It's trying to just go wide with board and try to recover it back with Barbados, right? So that's kind of the game plan for the deck, and to me, feels like the natural progression, right? And again, with the fail strikes, it just only helps to help clear board when you need to go for game, or when you have the on-rail. So let's do the thing. Let's take a look at some stats, shall we? So between the three decks, or actually no, this is only two. We have 32, 33 units, so quite a lot. We definitely want a lot of units in this type of deck. 8 pilots settled, no more, no less. So Mika and Amuro are great. Now, I can make the argument, maybe consider a Laughter in there because of the high mobility, but that's it doesn't really have a good link, so I can see the reason not to play it. Then we have between 5 and 6 commands and 3 to 4 bases. If you're someone like me, you'd rather I would play 3 Corsica because the 4 Corsica curse will always show up for me. So yeah, I can see where if you play less bases, you can play an extra show maybe. So it does allow for that flexibility in terms of that slots, but I think in this case 33 units makes sense in terms of just you want to play a lot of units. You just want to always have guys on board, right? You don't really care about trying to do crazy link plays because you just want to make sure you have the field, and then as long as you get one of the key pieces to help wall break, you're good to go from there. All right, so now we get the average cards per level. We got 13.33 level 2s for units, right? So let's see, we got the gun tanks, we got the GMs, we have the Gray's Customs, and we also have Hyzex, right? So it's pretty much we want to make sure that we always have a turn 2 play, putting down 2 units, or if you go second, or if you go first rather. No, that's if you go first. If you go second, you want to make sure you always have a turn to play 1 unit. Not that you can play your 3-2 from there, but yeah, you want to make sure that you always have a good chunk of the little guys to just put on the field early to get that early board, because if you can go Fatal Strike into a block, Fatal Strike destroy a blocker turn 4, that might open up the walls for you to start pinging for easy damage, and the faster you go and put your opponent at 3, the easier the rest of the game is from there, right? So that's kind of like in my eyes, the game plan from there, because if you look at the rest of the units curve, right, we have 4.3 units for level 3s, so a lot less than when I used to run 8 Rezels, right? And we have for level 4s just the Anshas and the Gundam. In this case, it's probably going to be 3 or 4 Anshas, and then whichever one you play 4, you play 3 of the other for the Gundam, right? And then for level 5, it's the 4 Gujins. So I think is interesting that it's kind of just a flat 4. That means it's consistently across the board, and it makes sense. Gujin as a card, you want to see it on critical moments, because when you have first form, and it depends if you want to link it or if you even have the Mika. Gujin's the only other thing that can enable first form's effect, right? And having it sit there for a turn, it kind of creates like a lame duck period where your opponent's like, well, if they could deal with it, they would deal with it, and if they don't deal with it, then it creates a bigger issue for them, because then Gujin's just going to come down and then ping it for 1 damage and allow it to just start swinging for free draws, right? So that's, I think, why Gujin is always a 4 in the deck. Maybe you go down to 3, maybe. Time will tell, right? And then from here, I think we just have one guy playing 1 4th form. So yeah, I mean, 4th form kind of fell off after the set, because you don't. It's a little bit too late in the game, so you don't really need it anymore. And you have better options, especially when you don't have to like hold the Mikas in order to get that link suppression off, right? You rather just draw the cards off first form. All right. So now here's our average cost. and AP and HP per level. So usual stats that I normally put in. Yeah, all kind of standard stuff that you'll see. Level 5 is your Gujins, level 4 it's been your Amuros and your Angshas. Level 3, that's your anywhere between your Rezals and your Barbados first form. So just kind of keep in mind where you want to hit your thresholds. Actually, level 3 is interesting because at 2.4 in the HP means that, you know, people aren't playing as many Rezals. You know, it's probably going to be 3 max at this point. But, you know, as we know from the averages, 3 max, that means they're definitely playing 4 of the Barbados first forms, right? So if you're playing specific decks, you want to make sure you know what kind of HP they're at, what to expect on every turn, and what their general curve is. This way you can kind of plan out your moves, right? That's why I always include these just like as a reference, just in case anyone's curious, and just in case, like, you know, I like seeing it as well, so I can always, it's a visually stimulating thing for me. All right, so let's move on to the third place list. This is one of the 3 blue-white decks. I don't feel comfortable calling it freedom blockers because there's only 2 freedoms in the deck. This is more like, I would say, epion blockers, because that is the real top end of this deck. Now, this deck got a bigger boss because before, the blue-white decks used to play the unicorn package, right? And the unicorn package was pretty good to wall break, allow you to do like a nice link on turn 5 or turn 6, and then allow you to sack off that link. You get back the Menager, then you link with the unicorn destroy mode, get to swing and rest stuff every turn from there, which is fine. All right, it is fine. You know, there's nothing wrong with that. To me, it was always one of those things where you had to get, you're not just getting a pilot and a unit, you're getting a pilot, a unit, and another unit. And if you get unicorn mode with no pilots, it's dead. If you get unicorn mode with destroy mode, it's also dead. Destroy mode is the only thing that's useful. And you know, unicorn mode with Menager is fine. Really, unicorn mode, destroy mode with Menager is even better. So it kind of like create that weird triangle of you need to see a lot of pieces to be able to pop off, right? Now, this deck does something different. Because you're playing the Zex and because Epion's here, you really only just need to get that pair. You're not playing any Kiras, none of that. You don't need, you can just kind of sit here with this deck until you get those 2 cards, and then you can pop off, right? Which, you know, to get one link off is not the most impossible thing in this game. I'm probably making it way worse, especially when you have 8 turns to do this because Epion's level 8, right? And for the most part, you're trying to just sit here, maybe trade efficiently, do some good bounces with Ale Strike, maybe do like an Amuro Ray play where you can rest something, and you have stuff like the Archangel, you have, I don't know, you have Forbidden Gundam here, which is a pretty fun blocker to me. If you're not playing Kira, you just replace Perfect Strike with it, because it's just a better Perfect Strike. Because it actually can do stuff. Because you can actually use it offensively in the sense that you can kill, I think it's like 3 AP or less, or 2 AP. You just kind of eat them with Forbidden Gundam and then restand with Archangel, so it kind of adds a little bit of good offense for that. So, again, the deck is playing, you're sitting there until level 8, and then you pop off with Epion Zex. And Epion Zex, at that point when it hits the field, it's going to be an 8/7 monster that says, well, if you block me, I'm going to draw a card and restand. And realistically, there's no blocker in the game except for one combination that can actually trade evenly with this, right? The only combination that can trade evenly with this is Aerial Rebuild plus a 2/1 pilot, right? Or you have to use like an action step command card, right? That's one of the things that can really trade for this without them being able to get the restand, because if they try to block it, you're drawing a card, right? And then you just reactivate Epion, and then when you reactivate Epion, you get to do it again, right? And the messed up part about Epion, which is fantastic, is that it doesn't actually matter if this card destroys anything with in battle, as long as something on your field destroys it. So once you have Epion, and as long as your guys are able to trade or are higher statted than your opponent, in terms of blockers, then you're fine. Then you can just go ahead and get your 2 attacks off with epion. Or at the very worst case, you know, epion acts as the wall breaker, which allows you it allows it to eat stuff and you need to draw more cards. Which at that point in the game on turn 8, it means that both players are probably resource deficient, and then epion from there should be able to getting that your opponent goes -2, you go +2 type deal. Well, not +2 because you're using 2 cards for it, but if you think about it in just terms of like advantage, right? Your opponent loses 2 cards. You lose the epion and Zex, hypothetically, if you trade, and then you draw 2 cards, right? So they're down 2, and then they pretty much just went down 2, right? If you look at the grand scheme of things, right? It's better than just playing show, because you go up by 1, because they're losing even more advantage from that point. And then, you know, once you hit the second epion, I think the game should end from there if it ever gets to like turn 9, turn 8. So yeah, there's a lot of things going for this deck that I felt made more sense than the Unicorn package, just because you have the end game or late game explosion potential to draw more cards and destroy your opponent's field a lot easier. Now, on the other side, we also have Tallgeese, right? On the lower end, it's level 4, cost 3, but you have to wait till level 5 to link with Zex. And it's okay. You know, it becomes a 5/5, and it can rest a level 2. Oh, sorry, 2 or less HP, which is Ward and Vanilla's and Barbados first form. There's a few targets for it. I would say it's one of those things that it does help most likely against the aggro matchup, because then if they put down guys, you can just eat them with Tallgeese. Unless we not forget, because you're linked, as long as you eat a unit, you get to draw a card with Zex. So, you know, actually now you have to swing at a unit with Tallgeese, target a different unit to rest that, so have another unit kill that. So it's kind of like, I don't know, it's like a weird timing issue, that you don't get to like swing at something, rest it, and then eat it and draw a card with Zex. That's one of those things that doesn't really work out that way just because of the game. But yeah, I think it's just a good card, especially when you're not playing Kira. You need something that have an answer to Rush, and you're not playing Sword Strike because you don't play Kira. So I think Tallgeese is probably the next best thing. And then aside from that, the Argama's an interesting choice to put in. That is something that stops Breach specifically. So against green-white matchups, it's one of those cards that like you can put it down and your opponent has to swing at it with the Wing Gundam. Granted, if they have like Death Scythe, then they're just gonna swing Death Scythe. So you know, it's one of those cards that I think it just depends on the meta. It depends on what you expect to see at the tournament. Because as we see from this one, not many green whites went X2 and above. So you know, in this case, I think if Argama was Archangel, would have probably been in a similar situation, hypothetically, right? Okay, so from here, let's go to some stats, and we get the breakdowns. All right, so that little sliver, someone was playing a Mu. Just put that out there. Someone was playing the Sword Strike package, because between the pilots we have 8.67, right? So I mean, someone's playing 9, some people are playing 8, most people are playing 8. So I would believe that there's probably a combination between Kira, Zex, and Amuro that you can kind of finagle to be able to get your Sword Strike links off, to be able to get Ale Strike links off, right? I think that's perfectly fine. I mean, there's definitely space in the deck because on average they're playing 10 commands, right? 10 commands and 5 bases, and they're only playing 27 units because in this type of deck, you have very good big units, meaning that you don't need to play a lot of them, which means that the space opens up for you to play a little bit more pilots and a little bit more commands, right? For commands, as we know, we have the draw cards, we have Overflowing, we have Show Resolve, we also have Striker Pack, so the usual suspects show up to help pad those numbers, right? Now, average cards per level, so we are actually seeing a decline in those awards. I think the third place deck was probably the only deck that was playing it, and it was maxed out. But the rest of the decks, you know, as we will see, and most likely we'll see in every white package going forward, is Lifrit plus Rick Diaz, right? And that's going to be something that's going to be very common. That's why Fail Strike is definitely necessary if you're playing purple. I'm not even going to argue that. I think it's 3 or 4. You get bare minimum, right? And it matters because those are like very efficient blockers, and that's kind of what anything that plays white is going to gravitate towards. So that's one thing. After that, we have cards. You know, we're in level 4 cards, right? Level 4, we have our usual suspect. We have Gundam, but we have the new addition of the new Tallgeese, right? I think that's a pretty good addition to play 1 or 2 of in that slot. Level 5s, we got, you know, anywhere between Forbidden Gundam or the Ale Strike, because again, Forbidden Gundam I think is just a better Perfect Strike. You can make the argument if you're playing the Kira package with a Mu to play Perfect Strike because it links with them. If you're not, then you can play Forbidden as a little bit more aggressive card. But you know, if you are, you know, both sides, it's just kind of player preference at that point. Now for level 7, level 8, we're seeing anywhere between 2 to 3 freedoms, and then kind of the same for level 8s, but we know that the third place deck was playing 4. So it kind of creates that sense of, well, which one you can either play in balance 3-3, or if you're not playing Kira, you can go down on freedom, go up on Zex, because if you're playing freedom with no Kira, you're not really going to be using your pilots on the white units. The only thing that you could freely link, honestly, not even link, freely pair is Amuro, because your Zex are going to be used to make sure that you get that link off with Epion. So, you know, in that case, it's kind of like that weird ratio depending on what your pilots look like, and then you can ask yourself, do you really need to play 2 or 3 freedoms? Because I mean, it is a force 6 stat line, so it's fantastic. I don't know. For part of me wants to say it's kind of funnier if you just play Justice instead, if you're not playing Kiro, because it's on a blocker. It's a 5/5, but you get the 2/2 blocker, so you get to I don't know, like have another board presence on the field. But you know, that's a fun little like tangent for a second. All right, now we got the breakdowns. We got a whole lot of numbers here. So Zawarts, Lifford / Rick Dom, Rick Diaz. Too much D on my head. We get the Gundam. Then we have Tallgeese. So we got a lot of usual suspects here. Not Tallgeese. Then we have Ale Strike and Forbidden, which are somehow just both 4/4s at that point. So really think like in terms of the stat line, the deck naturally does not go past 4, unless it's paired with another pilot, or if you have the Gundam pair on the field. So keep that in mind. If you're not seeing a pilot and they already use up the Amuro on their curve, then you know maybe you're sitting pretty if you have a 5 HP stat line, right? But unless we not forget, Ale Strike can still bounce it, etc., etc. But yeah, that's kind of just good to see that. Okay, you know, as we know, blockers shouldn't have too high of stats, and again, knowing that they cap out at 4 attack. The biggest thing to worry about is Gundam and Epion in terms of offensive power from there. All right. So, last deck that we're going to cover is the white-red deck. Now, this is a fascinating deck because it got a lot of fun tools in terms of, I don't know, what's the word? There's a lot of boss cards here. So, like, I'm tempted to call it a zoo deck because after turn 5, or at turn 5, you're just putting down big dude after big dude after big dude, provided that you have them, right? So, let's talk about this deck. Now, this deck plays cards like Kshatriya. We know that from set 1. Senanju. Didn't really see that in set 1, but you know, for reference, if it breaks something in the shield area, you deal 2 damage to your opponent's field, something on your opponent's field, and if it's paired, generic paired, it gets high maneuver. Now, we have the Quebly, which is new, right? Quebly and Haman Karn, those are 2 new cards. Quebly gets suppression on the turn that it's linked, and it has a when paired attacked, when paired with the Neo Zeon, I believe. It gets on attack trigger, deal 2 damage to an enemy unit that's damaged, right? Haman herself, when she's paired, deal, as long as it's a red unit that's paired to, deal 1 damage to something that has the equal to level or less, right? So it's kind of like how Marita's attack trigger works, but only when paired, right? So here is interesting because before this set, we did not have the following cards: Rick Diaz, Quebly, Haman, and all range attack. Right? Everything else here from set 1, or the first couple star decks. Now, I think what really helps this deck catch up is the fact that Quebly is level 7. It is the top end. It has suppression, so you can come back and catch up in terms of damage. I think that and Haman is not a Cyber new type, so it doesn't actually work with Baby Kshatriya, but she is a new type, so that'll work with regular Kshatriya. So what happens is that you can put a Kshatriya down and then pair it with Haman, and you're dealing 1 damage to 2 things, and then another instance of damage to another thing. So it's kind of like you're getting the Marita trigger, but it's on the turn that you do the pair instead. So I think that's pretty damn good in terms of, like, you get to play essentially another copy of Marita, and I'm doing really hard air quotes here. But the Quebly is also fantastic because if you look at the curve, right? If you go turn 5 Kshatriya, I'm gonna assume all this scenario that you have the links, right? Let's just pretend, because you're not doing anything for the first 5 turns. I played this deck. You don't do anything. You just sit there and play blockers. You have Kshatriya. You get the ping. You get the swing. Get the ping again, right? Next turn you go Sinanju. Sinanju swings at shield, ping something. Then after that, Quebly's here to kind of clean up the mess in terms of if there's stuff that has damage, it's gonna be able to destroy those pretty easily. If it already has a damage on it, Haman plus Quebly destroys up to 3. It doesn't have any damage on it. Haman plus Quebly is up to level 3 HP, right? So it does help clean up a lot of messes. There is a few things about this deck that I can talk about at length, but I'll keep the spark notes here. 1, the command slots here are very flexible. You see, in this case, we have 2 close combat, 3 overflowing, 2 unforeseen, 2 all range, 1 striker pack. Now, you can go 4 close combat, 3 striker pack, I don't know, like 3 or 4 overflowings, no problem, right? You can go any combination between these, and I think it's absolutely fine. I think there's so much flexibility in this deck in terms of what you want or what you expect the meta to be. To say, I don't need to play unforeseen. I think I'm going to see more rush. Okay, I want to put an extra striker pack. I want to put an extra close combat, right? So you can kind of mess with your ratios very well to the point that your opponent doesn't really know how many you're playing because you're playing so many commands, right? I think that's good. I think the next spark note for the bases, you play the 06 base because you don't need to play Vesalius. You could play Shuji's Hideout. You could play Ralua like I do. You could play a mix of any of those 3 combined. And I think it's still fine, right? It depends on what you want your game plan to be. But the 06 base, just being able to have access to it and just be able to play a base that you don't need an effect with is fantastic because it's going to stop rush pretty well. There's no breach 6 unless you do a lot of weird things to get to that number. So breach 5 wing, they probably have to swing at it. You know, it's one of those things that the 06 base adds so much defense, especially, again, you're sitting there for 5 turns. And that 06 base is going to come really handy, especially when you might be rushed down, and if you don't feel like there's going to be anything in burst, you can put that down. It could at least chunk a few attacks, right? And then the last thing I'll say is that there's a weird amount of synergy between just having a bunch of blockers on the field and then having guys that deal damage. I don't want to get into it here, but just being able to put down Lifrit and then Rick Diaz and then like another Rick Diaz or another Lifrit the turn after, it adds a lot in terms of stopping your opponent. And even if you just chump these blockers, that means there's going to be residual damage on your opponent's field, allowing you to clean up with Kshatriya, Sinanju, or Quebly, depending on whenever this happens. Because as we know, a lot of things only have 4 or 5 HP, right? We do some quick maths. Let's use Rick Diaz, for example. It's 4 HP, Rick Diaz blocks that, cool, they're at 1. Kshatriya immediately pops that. If they're at 5 HP, they're at 2. Then Sinanju immediately pops that, right? So it's kind of those things that, although, like, that just incidentally, in theory, these kind of work together, right? So, I'll save the rest of the stuff for when I do a deck profile of this, but Let's move on. So here's a breakdown for this deck: 27 units, 10 commands, 3 bases, and 10 pilots. Right now, you need to play a lot of pilots, and they don't have too much cross synergy in terms of like generic linking. So you need those pilots in order for the deck to work. It's one of those decks that if you don't see the pilots, the deck doesn't do anything. Sinanju, I guess, can do stuff, but it doesn't do anything if you don't see the pilots, or if you have all the pilots and no units, right? So, in my opinion, that's why you want to play a lot of draw cards, try to filter as much as possible, try to dig for that stack that's in there, just to try to get some plays out, right? And again, Matt, I gotta stop myself before I go too far down the deck profile rabbit hole. Average card for level. This is a hilarious chart. We have 2 Zawarts. We have the 4 Lifrit and the 4 Rick Diaz. We have 2 of the baby Kshatriyas. We have Ale Strike plus Kshatriya. We have Sinanju, and then we have Quebly, right? So very clean. I think it all makes sense, honestly. I think Zawart might be like the only thing that you could probably flex out. Maybe Baby Kshatriya, because I mean Baby Kshatriya is really just there so you can kind of get an early link with Merida if you need it against like a rush deck. It's also the only target for Full Frontal's ability, otherwise he's just a 2/2 vanilla, +2/+2 vanilla. So yeah, I mean, like, I think the Zawarts are, or maybe if you want to go down on like the Rick Diaz or the Lifrit, one of them can be 4, one of them can be 3. I think that's about it. I think it's the only flex spots you got, because it's a very, very tight deck. But again, it knows what it needs to do. You just play a bunch of blockers with a bunch of big guys at the end. So some stuff is non-negotiable, like the big guys. You gotta play at least 10 to 12 of them, and then everything else from there is just fill in the blanks with blockers, right? So that's again quite a funny graph, but you know, kind of works out in favor for the deck. And now for the breakdown, the numbers here are pretty all over the place. Since you do have access to 5 attack pretty early on level 5, but it does end up curving out at that, right? 5 attack is the printed base for all these guys, and 5 HP is also really important because nothing in your deck can go past 5 HP except for Quevely. Every single link, that's a lie. Okay, sorry. Full Frontal's at 2, up to +2/+2, so you can go to 6, I guess. But if you do the links correctly, then the Kshatriya is going to be 5 HP. Okay, no, Sinanju's going to be 6 HP, and then Quebly's going to be 6 HP, right? So it's kind of those possibilities. You're not going to be using the pilots on anything else other than their link companions, because it's probably the best move, unless you're desperate. So the deck does kind of cap out in terms of what, like, it doesn't reach 6 that easily. And it can't go to 7. I mean, it could go to 7, but it's also, that'll be pretty jank. My point is, the numbers for this deck are pretty hard. Like, it's not as clean as other decks in terms of like how high your numbers can go. Like for example, you know, Freedom Gundam can reach 6/7. Wing Gundam plus Hero reaches 7/7. Stuff like that. Like, it doesn't really go super high, right? Because again, you're dealing with, you're able to get more incidental damage off, so you're actually, it's better off just to play it in the sense that these high attack stats are meant to wall break their base no matter what, because everything in your deck, that's actually the best part, everything in your deck once it's paired destroys every single base in the game, because you can hit 6 easily, so you're not getting stopped by that. And if they play the 5, the base stats are fine enough. So that's kind of where I'm going with this. It's just a thing about the deck, right? And then I think the other fun part is that you do hit 4 HP pretty easily. Like, you hit it pretty early because you have Lifrit, and then you have the baby Kshatriya, 3/4, and after that, everything else after that has 4 more HP base, right? So again, it's good early. Late, it's kind of like iffy because again, you're maxing out at 5/6. So that's just another insight into that deck in terms of like what the curve kind of looks like depending on like which pilots they play and stuff like that, right? All right. So that's it for the Eagles webcam locals. It's a good exercise in terms of looking at what new decks have pumped up, and I think we've seen three. I think this is a good showcase of the three newish decks that we're going to be seeing in the meta nowadays. And I personally like seeing new decks pop up, even if it's like a derivative of, the Blurple list went from Rush, now it's mid range, right? It's a kind of an evolution, right? In terms of it has new cards, so it kind of changes the playstyle in terms of trying to change up the classification. So it really does like help paint a picture that green white's around, but there's other stuff to play, and that's what I'm here for. So with that being said, that's it for today's episode of Replay Works for Replay Review. Let me know going forward if there's any like other interesting webcam events that I can probably grab events data from, because I know we're soon gonna enter a dry season after the next Florida regionals. So hopefully, new type challenges pop up. I get the data for that. So keep me posted. If that being said, thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.